Welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia. And for the first time in a couple weeks, Zach Bloomquist is back in the producer's chair, feeling a little bit better. Zach, thanks for making the trip over to the studio today.
Look, if I fall asleep, it's not because the show's bad. I'm just tired.
Yeah, you're entitled to that.
Yeah, you don't fall asleep. You just go on Hinge.
Yeah, I really.
Oh, maybe not anymore. Yeah. But we don't have to dive into.
That's later in the off season. That's later off.
That's like an early March conversation that we can have here. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We are almost at 9,000 subscribers. Trying to get to 10,000 by the draft. I think that's a good number, good target that we have. We're going to be breaking down over the next few weeks each division's teams in the episodes we have coming out. So today is going to be the AFC West. We'll hit one or two big questions for each team, recap a little bit of their season. And Ziggy has a must-keep and a must-target for each team. So you can have a good idea of what players you'll be wanting to hold on to and which players to go after during free agency. We also have memberships now on our YouTube channel, a couple members, which is very, very nice of people to sign up. What else is there? Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, everywhere basically that you could find us at Paul Farrington Show. Trying to think of some housekeeping things to go over right now before we dive into it. And the mailbag. We'll have a mailbag at the end of this episode. And whenever you feel like it, just drop a mailbag question in. We love getting those and answering. It doesn't really matter if it's football or not during the offseason. Preferably some football questions, but we don't mind what you ask us.
Questions about us?
Yeah, you can ask questions about us too. I mean, for the most part, we live interesting lives at times, but Ziggy, this weekend I actually went to the Stadium Series in the NHL. I know we're not an NHL show, but it was in MetLife Stadium. Saw the Devils and the Flyers with our good friend Vince. Freezing cold. Absolutely freezing. Jonas Brothers concert, hockey game. It ends. It's like 19 degrees outside. And Vince and I, Vince has been on the show a couple times, or he's called into the show a few times. Vince and I are both people who would forget where you parked your car in MetLife Stadium. So we walk outside, and I look at Vince and go, "Oh my God, do you remember where we were?" He's like, I was hoping you were going to say that. We spent about 15 minutes walking around the tundra that was the MetLife parking lot before finally finding our car. And luckily getting out with, mild frostbite on our feet. So it was a scary situation developing in MetLife, but very cool from the NHL, the Stadium Series. They did a great job. With that said, because Ziggy didn't seem particularly interested in that story whatsoever.
Look, man, I'm trying my best here, all right? We got kind of cold outside MetLife. People are here to hear about football, Paul.
All right. We'll get into the AFC West. We're going to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, MetLife Stadium. It's football, right? Yeah. It's football. I thought it was fun. Jonas Brothers were good.
Yeah, nobody cares about that, but
it was fine. Some dude walks by and he goes, just shoot him already. Hockey fans and Jonas Brothers do not seem to mix well. Okay, so we're going to go Chiefs, then Raiders, Broncos, and Chargers, the order that they finished in the division, starting with the Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, 11-6. They hold the 32nd pick in the draft right now. Last year, 14-3. Dropped a couple games to 11-6 this year. Mahomes and the offense sort of out of sync throughout the entire season, but the defense took a big step forward and carried them for several parts of this season until the offense was able to turn it up a notch and go on the Super Bowl winning run. And now there's a three-peat in mind. People are talking about the first team. I believe it would be the first team ever in the NFL to have
the first team in the Super Bowl era, at least. I think if you go way back.
Well, we're not counting. Yeah, we're not counting that. So three-peat of the Super Bowl. So our big question here, and I'll make it very clear because Ziggy got mad in our group chat when I didn't give him his fair credit. These questions are originated from Ziggy, or at least the intro questions for these topics. How did the Chiefs improve their offense this season, Ziggy?
So the Chiefs are faced with an interesting sort of dilemma, right? Because as we saw last season, this team can win a Super Bowl with just an okay Patrick Mahomes-led offense and an elite defense.
Crazy.
Now, you've only got about $15 million in cap space heading into this offseason. That's not nothing, but a ton of players are leaving on defense, right? Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, Willie Gay. Like, there are a lot of big-time, crucial free agents. And you can replace those guys in the draft to some extent. But the Chiefs are going to have to make some tough choices. Even if they restructure Mahomes, it's not as simple as go and just get Mike Evans or go and just get a great receiver or tight end at the top of the draft. So the Chiefs this offseason, I think their fans are going to want them to make a big splash, and you're going to hear about all of the free agents that could go to them. But it's going to be much more about hunting for bargains, getting guys like they did Juju Smith-Schuster a few years ago, who come in on affordable deals, produce well enough, and count on Patrick Mahomes to keep it going.
Well, it's funny, we'll talk about Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed in a second here, but when you look at the receiving room, really, because that's where a lot of fans' eyes are going to go. It's one of the premier positions, one of the positions that gets a ton of attention because it's such a flashy position in the NFL. Rashee Rice was a great breakout for them this year. He played very well throughout much of the second half of the year and into the playoffs. I thought he turned into, some people are saying a number one, maybe a number one on the Chiefs, but it's still a startable receiver in the NFL for sure. The Chiefs receiving room, though, had 44 drops this year. It was the most in the NFL. And think about some of the drops they had. Kadarius Toney lost the Lions game with a drop. He was off sides against the Bills. Then Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the drop against the Eagles. That unit cost the Chiefs multiple times down the stretch in big games. So they're trying to look for someone who can come in and make a difference. I don't think that they need, we were talking about Mike Evans and Tee Higgins, who's probably going to get franchise tagged anyway. But those guys, big names that would be really exciting, they don't necessarily, as you said, need to go down that route because Patrick Mahomes is that good. You mentioned someone that really raised my eyebrows, and I know Zach's going to love hearing this name. So why don't you tell everyone who you have your eyes on for the Chiefs to go after at receiver?
So we said we were going to have a target for each team. For me, the most important player for the Chiefs to target this offseason that they can reasonably get is Zach's favorite receiver in the entire NFL, besides any player on the Dolphins, Calvin Ridley. Now, if you're the Chiefs, you're looking for a guy. We don't necessarily need the ultimate number one alpha, right? You need a guy who can reliably catch the ball, who can take the top off defenses, who can run routes well. Someone who you can get on a pretty good deal, but who you can count on to be productive. And Calvin Ridley didn't have the flashiest season in the entire NFL this year, right? People didn't talk about him a lot, but he had a solid season, right? This was a guy the Jaguars were able to go to. He had some really big games. I mean, he put up over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns.
No, he did. He quietly had a 1,000-yard season.
But he's not going to be a guy who costs you $25, $20, $30 million a year. Right, he's a prime candidate again for one of those Juju Smith-Schuster type deals where the market's not what he wants it to be. He comes in, he takes, say, a year or two, short deal, not a huge rate, and he does basically the kind of deal Odell Beckham Jr. did last offseason. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for him with the Chiefs. It would improve the offense pretty quickly, and it'd give Mahomes another weapon.
Could you imagine Calvin Ridley on that offense?
I mean, the thing about Ridley that's nice is you talked about Rashee Rice broke out. Ridley can line up in a lot of different spots. He can line up in X or in Z. Mm-hmm. So whoever the Chiefs draft and whoever eventually breaks out for them, he'll be able to play around them no matter what.
Yeah, now you're talking about a unit with Kelce, Rashee Rice, Calvin Ridley. That's all of a sudden a lot more formidable than if you roll out with just Rice and you're trying to scrape together whoever it may be, what Toney and Sky Moore right now. Tony's not coming back. So I think that could work for sure on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed both want to come back. It's almost impossible for them to pull it off right now financially before some cap maneuvering. Cap magic is possible in the NFL.
But the Chiefs don't do that kind of stuff. They are 30th in cash spending over the past 5 years. They really don't like to spend money.
Well, you have to think they'd prioritize Chris Jones, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at how the Kansas City Chiefs have operated. This is why I think Chris Jones is the one player they can't afford to lose this offseason.
Agreed.
The way they operate, and Steve Spagnuolo has done a great job of this. They love taking corners in the mid to late rounds, and then they just keep cycling them through and let them leave, right? The most recent example of that was Charvarius Ward. Excellent player, right? He left and was very good, but immediately players on the Chiefs stepped up and replaced him. As good as L'Jarius Sneed was, I don't want to discount it. He was one of the 5 best corners in the NFL this year. I just can't see him coming back to Kansas City.
It's nuts how Trent McDuffie rolls through and all of it's just great. The Vikings can't find a corner to save their life, and the Chiefs are just rotating guys in and out. Just unbelievable. Sneed said he wants to come back though. He's saying we need to make it work somehow. I mean, all these guys. It's kind of cool about their dynasty right now is that everyone's bought into it. I know that Chris Jones was holding out for a while, but it seems like everyone is really all in on, hey, let's just keep going. Why stop the party? I have a feeling they might be able to make it work.
I will say though, you are I think you're overselling a little bit, right? So yeah, he says he wants to come back, but he's also going on Kay Adams saying, "Hey, Brett Veach, pay me."
I mean,
right?
Look,
so
of course he wants money, but I think ideally he wants to come back.
I think he does, but realistically, I think the Chiefs are not going to offer him a top of the market contract. He has earned a top of the market contract. As nice as it would be for him to stay. What he is he's a number one corner. Chris Jones is one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in the history of the game. You have to prioritize Jones if you're forced between them.
Well, and right now they only have Neil Farrell Jr., who he contributed for 62 snaps in 2023. That's all they have on the interior of their defensive line right now, if the season started today. So it's already a position of need. Plus, you have one of the best guys in the league, a huge difference maker, and one of the best playoff performers that we've seen at the position too. Think about all the big plays he made in the Super Bowl. A couple plays where Purdy got hit, right? And if you don't have that pressure, maybe you're completing the pass. I know there was one. I can't remember. I keep forgetting who it was to down the sideline late in the game. But Chris Jones has been huge, yeah. You
just think about it. How many players are there in the NFL on the interior defensive line that consistently get to the quarterback? Like Aaron Donald,
like two.
Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence gets pressures. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is very good. Chris Jones is better than almost all of those guys.
It's like Donald and Chris Jones are the guys that always come to mind. Quinnen Williams is great as well. But yeah, he's irreplaceable. So I expect him to be back in Kansas City. Okay, let's go on to the Raiders, who came in second. Kind of surprising that the Raiders came in second in the AFC West this year.
They had such a great late season surge, right? Because they were sort of out of the playoffs, people didn't pay attention to this, but over their last 6 games, their point differential was, I think, it was like plus 63.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you beat someone 63-21.
No, sure. But like, what did they do? They lost to the Vikings by a couple points. They beat the Chargers. They beat the Chiefs. Close loss to the Colts. They beat the Broncos.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying those were the best teams in the NFL, but like the Chiefs, Colts, Broncos, Vikings, those were all solid.
I mean, they
teams.
ended with 3 division wins. 3 division wins right there. So go from 6-11 to 8-9. The big story for them is Josh McDaniels was fired 8 games into the season. Shocker that that came to an end. And Antonio Pierce wound up taking over as interim head coach. Jimmy G was benched. Aiden O'Connell in. The defense surged late in the season. I mean, some of these numbers here on the defensive side of the ball, from week 9 through the end of the year, the Raiders led the NFL in fewest points per game allowed, most defensive touchdowns, fewest penalties, and the 3rd most sacks. So, they rallied around this guy. Max Crosby said he'd request a trade if Antonio Pierce wasn't promoted to head coach. And to some degree, I do think Mark Davis listened to his players and wound up promoting Pierce for that reason. We'll see if it comes back to bite him. The guy had no head coaching experience before. But he was a guy that everyone was able to rally around. And now they bring in Tom Telesco, who you said has the greatest agent in the history of sports, potentially, outside of maybe Kirk Cousins, who somehow lands another GM job. And here you have a Raiders offseason that's going to be highly focused around what to do at quarterback. So Jimmy G, he's going to be gone. He's suspended 2 games, cost himself $12 million, as you noted.
Yeah, the Raiders, I haven't seen many people say this. The Raiders got a nice little gift with this Jimmy G PED suspension because he had a $12 million salary guarantee this year. And now because of the PEDs, that just disappears. So the Raiders just freed up $12 million in cap space overnight.
Yeah, not a bad situation. So with them picking at 13th in the draft right now, if you were Las Vegas, you can't really roll out with O'Connell next year, or at least just him. So are you looking to make a move in the draft, or would you focus your attention on a free agent?
The Raiders have 2 possibilities this offseason. And really, I think the player it comes down to and what he wants to do is Davante Adams. There's 2 ways I can see this offseason going. One is, Garrett Wilson changed his number from 17 to 5. They are clearly courting Davante Adams to go reunite with Aaron Rodgers in New York. The Jets are desperate enough to make a trade. But I don't think that's what this team is going to do because this team is ready to compete, right? You've got Adams, obviously, but you have Max Crosby, one of the best edge rushers in the league. You've got some decent weapons in Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow. right? You could possibly bring back Josh Jacobs.
Michael Mayer was good.
Yeah, he was all right. If I'm the Raiders, my number one free agent target this year, and the way that I see their offseason being centered around, is actually Kirk Cousins. This hasn't gotten a ton of traction, but the Raiders have a decent offensive line. They could have a strong offense. And look, this team is so tired of mediocrity, and I really doubt that Antonio Pierce wants to tear it all down and rebuild.
Well, Davante was recruiting him. Davante was going after him.
Yeah, I mean, getting Kirk Cousins to the Raiders gives you a functional offense, arguably a very good offense. There's a lot that could happen. And there are a few stars on defense that you hope continue to develop.
Can they afford Kirk?
Sure they can. With Jimmy G gone now, his cap number disappears. They've got like $60 million in cap space. Just sign Kirk to one of those $40 million guaranteed deals that he loves. Am I saying that they're guaranteed to get him? No, there are certainly some roadblocks. Yeah. But the Raiders they can sell it. Well, right?
This is the first time really that the team has had a solid defense going into, or at least you're hoping to have a solid defense going into the season in a long time. This was the 5th time since the NFL expanded to 32 teams in 2002 that the Raiders ended in the top half of defenses in the league. Which is kind of crazy to think about how often we turn on the Raiders and see them just getting absolutely scorched. Just the past couple of years, they've been horrendous on the defensive side of the ball. This year, they have a little success. So if they're able to, continue Tyree Wilson, if he's able to improve a little bit on the edge, they are able to go out and get a couple guys in free agency. With that offense, I don't think Josh Jacobs will be back. It's just, you're not going to pay him that money. He averaged 3.5 yards a carry this season. It wasn't the same guy that you saw a year ago. And Zamir White came in and played fine in fill-in roles. But I do think you get another running back in the draft. You have White. The receiving core is there. Yeah, Kirk Cousins would be awesome to come in. And you need a quarterback in that conference to compete for a playoff spot. So I like it. I like it, Ziggy. Who's your must keep?
So assuming that this is how things go for the Raiders, who they need to keep depends on how the offseason goes for them, right? But if I'm the Raiders, my big concern, again, we're assuming they bring in Kirk Cousins, right?
Well, if you bring in, that's a huge assumption. But finish your thought. Go ahead.
If the Raiders aren't able to bring in Kirk Cousins and have to let Aiden O'Connell roll out or draft a rookie quarterback, there aren't any relevant free agents, right? Because the team's just rebuilding. Everything that's going to be relevant turns around the draft. Assuming they want to compete next year, though, Andre James is the player they've got to bring back. He had a great year last year. He had his best year as a pass protector and as a run blocker. He's only 27. Center is one of those positions that I think very often gets ignored in the NFL. Because on the outside, it seems like it's just another interior offensive line position. But in these offensive systems that are starting to take over the league, the center is the one responsible for identifying blitz packages. The center is the one responsible for figuring out who needs to block where and exactly how things are going to be handled, because the quarterback has to orchestrate a whole offense around them now, right? With all the motion and pre-snap movements. So getting, center's an important position. Rodney Hudson, obviously, he was good for the Raiders, but they traded him away. I would not be comfortable starting a rookie center on the Raiders this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, rookie center, never ideal. I'm trying to think about this quarterback situation because I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to go to the Raiders, even though it is enticing. It's not the worst location.
The only other real free agent of note is Josh Jacobs, right? Here's a player that's a pseudo free agent that I think they need to keep, Davante Adams.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they get rid of Davante, that now we're talking about, you could. If the Raiders go and make a move for a rookie, that's not the worst case scenario here. They just need someone that they like. I highly doubt they trade up to 3, being at 13 right now, because that seems to be the most likely possibility of going to get one of those top guys. But if they're in love with Penix or Bo Nix or McCarthy, I can see one of those guys being drafted.
Yeah, but that means they're unlikely to have much success next year. That's just how it is.
Do you think that team's right? I guess it is. If the defense shows up again, that team with a good quarterback can compete, yeah.
Again, do they win a Super Bowl? Not necessarily, but keep in mind what the standards are for the Raiders, right? We're not talking about the Green Bay Packers here.
Sure, yeah.
Making the playoffs and winning a playoff game would be a pretty good year for them.
But that's why I'm saying, do you really want to go after Kirk Cousins for maybe 2 years or so of Kirk when the roster around him, you're probably not going to win right now? Why not try and get your young guy, so that you can build up and have a window in like 2 years?
At a certain point, the Raiders need to win games, right? They've been in Las Vegas for a while and haven't done anything. They have a lot of players who are ready to win now.
All right.
Right? Like Davante Adams is ready to win now.
Crosby's ready to win now. Yep. No,
so
I think it's a fair point.
It's super easy to say, like, let's just draft the 4th or 5th best quarterback in the draft and hope they're good. But when you have an opportunity with a team that's hot, with a lot of veterans that want to play, with a coach they believe in, you just don't get a lot of opportunities like that. And letting it pass, resetting the window, and again, hoping that the 5th best quarterback in the draft is good. I don't know.
And look, if they do, let's say they do bring in Kirk and have a couple good years, then you're probably in a good spot to blow it up when Adams is on his way out. Crosby's probably declining a little more.
Yeah, Kirk doesn't sign the deals that cripple teams, right? He signs 2-year big money guaranteed deals.
He's amazing at it. Okay, let's go on to the Broncos. They were 8-9 as well this year. They have the 12th pick in the draft. Broncos have missed the playoffs for 8 straight years after winning the Super Bowl, which is kind of crazy to think that. The Broncos have a pretty high standard in Denver of being one of the better franchises in the NFL. They've lost 8 straight games to the Raiders. This year, they finally broke a 16-game losing streak to the Chiefs. I mean, big struggles in the division. And as far as I saw, they're $24 million over the salary cap right now. They're heavily over the salary cap at the moment. It's not really one of the teams with the most desirable situations in the NFL at the moment. And I love your question, similar to what we just talked about with the Raiders. You said, WTF do you do at quarterback if you're a Denver Broncos fan right now? Because Russell Wilson expects to be cut in March. Jarrett Stidham is just not going to be the replacement. And do you really want to roll with one of those free agents? You could go after a Mitch Trubisky, a Sam Darnold, a Jacoby Brissett, but that's just, that's not going to work out.
You can have Tua.
Yeah, go. You can have Tua. I've seen Mac Jones mentioned. I've seen Justin Fields mentioned. Jimmy G, one of the rookies. What do you like if you were GM right now? If you're George Payton, what are you doing?
It's so tough to find ways to improve this team, right? You've got a solid offensive line. You've got decent receivers, though Jerry Jeudy's on the last year of his deal. You've got a defense that was horrible for much of the year with a few good performances. And if you're letting Russell Wilson go, he's not getting traded for the 1st-round draft picks the Broncos paid to get for him, right? He's getting cut for nothing, maybe traded for a conditional 7th if there's a team that really likes him. So you don't have a lot of options. I think the Broncos' best option really is trying to trade to the top of the draft, give up whatever you have to, hope that Sean Payton's able to develop, whether it's Jaden Daniels or Drake May or whoever you're able to get at like that number 2, number 3 spot. See what you're able to do. But the free agents are incredibly uninspiring. They simply don't have the money, I think, or patience to sign Kirk Cousins. And otherwise,
no, they don't have the money.
Like, what are you going to do? You mentioned Jimmy G. He's one of the better free agent targets. He was terrible last year.
I mean, some people talked about Justin Fields. Could you trade for him?
You could, but Justin Fields is bad.
Justin Fields, you get with Sean Payton. I've seen some people say Baker Mayfield or Tannehill. Baker's going to go back to Tampa. I'm quite confident in that.
I'm not.
Really?
I think there's a chance he will, but Baker Mayfield could be getting a way bigger deal than people think this offseason. I would not be surprised to see Baker Mayfield sign an $80 million contract. I'm not sure the Buccaneers have the stomach for that.
Well, we'll get to Baker in the NFC South.
But again, you list those guys. None of those guys are all that exciting, right? Baker Mayfield's not taking you to a Super Bowl.
Fields, I think, could get the fan base excited a little bit with Sean Payton, but I doubt it would work out. That's where, do you really want to throw in all your marbles again? Like push in your chips on a top 3 selection in the draft right after it backfired so much on the Wilson trade. I mean, that's sort of what the NFL is about, is people are just afraid to make risks these days. But really the teams that hit on these quarterbacks are the ones, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Mahomes. Those are the teams that you see competing for the Super Bowl year in and year out. It's just, if this didn't work, now we're talking about a Broncos team that is really, really set back if they go from 12-3 and fail.
Yeah, but at a certain point, like I've said, I mean, you need action, right? This Broncos team simply has to do something. And I'm just not getting the sense that Sean Payton is content to ride it out with some mediocre quarterback, miss the playoffs for another year, and try and move on. I mean, last year was a disappointing humiliation for Payton and Broncos fans alike.
But the thing, when I look at Denver, and it's a little different from Vegas has some pieces in place that I really like. They have a few superstars on both sides of the ball, as you said, that are ready to win right now. Denver, I see Patrick Surtain on defense. And, there's a couple other guys there. And on offense, I'm really not in love with anybody. Cortland Sutton and Judy are okay threats at receiver. I'm not sure that the best thing for this team isn't to just sit tight at 12, get the best defensive player available or the best player available who falls. I've seen a lot of people have mocked, who is it? Terry and Arnold, the Alabama cornerback, to them, because they need a lot of help at corner too. They need a pass rusher. And in this draft where they're picking, there should be somebody. I'm not sure that the best case scenario for Denver isn't continue to rebuild and have a little patience here, as opposed to push all your chips in on a quarterback who would be going into a kind of tricky situation. That's where I fall with Denver. I would stand pat. I know it's kind of boring, but for them, the best decision might be, roll out with one of those backup quarterbacks or someone, maybe it is Jimmy Garoppolo. It would suck, but I don't know if the team is ready to go in. And that's kind of cowardly as I'm saying it. I hear it, but that's sort of what I'm feeling with Denver. There's so many holes on that team.
Yeah, it would be short-sighted, I think, to try and move up and get a quarterback. But there's certainly going to be sending out feelers, because really the alternative probably is Jameis Winston. I mean, Sean Payton
it's a
liked
crappy
Winston.
Situation to be.
No, it's the Russell Wilson deal wasn't a huge failure. It really set this team back for a long time. And it's going to be a long road.
Some people said Mac Jones as well.
But Mac Jones isn't good.
And I'm not trying to sell Mac Jones on you. I'm just saying people are saying Mac Jones.
No, I understand. I'm just, again, this types of quarterbacks, I think Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, and Gardner Minshew are sort of the best quarterbacks they could hope to get outside the draft. That's bad.
Yeah, I think what could work for them, and this is kind of a little risky, but if you go with the defensive player 12 and then see if one of those other three quarterbacks fall and gets into the 20s, then maybe you trade up and take a swing on one of them. That might feel a little, I would feel a little better about that than mortgaging the future for Jay and Dan. I mean, these guys have question marks, all of them do. And Denver just seems like they're one big mistake away from really, really imploding even more, which is somehow could be possible. Okay, let's before we move on to the Chargers, who's your must keep and must target?
So must target for me, you've mentioned two big needs for them, cornerback and pass rusher. I actually believe in Baron Browning, I think, a lot more than the average NFL fan. So I think edge rushers.
You know who Baron Browning is a lot more than the average NFL fan.
I think he's going to have a real breakout year. So Broncos fans watch for that. So for me, I think their biggest need going in this offseason besides quarterback is cornerback. The player that I think they've got to get if they're able to get him, Chidobe Awuzie from the Bengals.
He's good.
He seems very unlikely to re-sign. He's one of those, he's not a lockdown elite corner one. But you don't need that if you're the Broncos. What you need is a reliable player who can step in, move Riley Moss down to cornerback 3, because you don't want him starting for you. And someone who can just match up next to Pat Surtain and be pretty good. He is exactly that guy.
And if you get a few pieces on defense in free agency, then maybe you're a little more inclined to take a swing on an offensive player in the draft.
I don't think that's how they should be thinking about it.
But
I mean, the offense is so much better than the defense in this draft. I mean, this is a terrible year to need defensive line. There are no defensive line prospects I unequivocally believe in, and none are going in the top 10. For a team that has their two huge needs at edge rusher and interior defensive line, that's not the news you want to hear, but it's just true. Then you talk about the player they need to keep, and Broncos fans are not going to want to hear this. I know they're going to be angry. I'm preparing for the comments. Again, this is more of a fact that the Broncos don't have any enormous free agents coming up than the fact that this player is really good. But I do think if I were the Broncos,
walking it back a little bit.
No, if I'm the Broncos, there's a player that I really do want to keep, and that is Lloyd Cushenberry. Now, look, Is he the best player in the entire NFL? No. But he is an elite run blocker and a solid pass blocker at an important position on your offensive line. I know it's disappointing. This is like 2 times in a row I've picked center. But like, what am I going to pick? Lil Jordan Humphrey?
I saw a subreddit today of Broncos from Broncos Nation and Broncos Country. I'm sorry. I know that's a big distinction. Yeah. And Lloyd Cushenberry's name came up and everybody wrote, God, no, let this guy go. God, no, let this guy go. But
yeah, that's exactly what you think until you have a bad center, right? He is a decent player. And he's probably going to sign. I mean, my guess is he signs for like 3 years, 17 to 18 million a year. He's going to have a nice payday. The Broncos should be the one who give it to him.
Man, yeah, they're not going to be happy about that. But you're right. When you have a bad center, it sucks. So we'll see.
You and I know that better than anyone.
Dude, of course we do. Of course we do. Chargers were 5-12, stunningly for the expectations they had coming into the season. Really, this whole division the past 2 years is kind of just absolutely sucked compared to what you were hoping for. They're picking 5th overall in the draft this year. And, they went from 10-7 to 5-12. Brandon Staley was fired. Finally, it felt like for Chargers fans, a huge sigh of relief after a 63-21 loss to the Raiders in Week 14. I remember seeing updates on that game, just absolutely blown away by what was happening. And the defense finishes 24th in the league. They go ahead and bring in Jim Harbaugh. Justin Herbert also had a season-ending index finger fracture. But they bring in Jim Harbaugh. Greg Roman now is the new offensive coordinator to try and fix the problems that they had on that side of the ball. They have Austin Eckler as a potential free agent, Gerald Everett, Kenneth Murray, Alohi Gilman, to name a few. Probably looking to extend Rashawn Slater during the year, during the offseason. So where does that leave us with the Chargers? This team has gaping holes on defense. You go up and down it. Despite some star power name, there are a lot of issues on that side of the ball. They're probably going to need to make some moves at receiver if they let go of Mike Williams. As I said, Eckler's already probably on his way out the door too. So what's the first, your question was, what can Jim Harbaugh do to be competitive next year as he tries to turn it around with so many holes to fill? What would you address first?
For me, I think the best thing for the Chargers to do is to give up on being competitive next year. I know that's tough, but you look at the contracts they have and the situation they're in, and there's so much they need to do, right? They're projected $35 million over the cap. Now, you roll over some cap space, that's going to go down to more like 29 or 30, but they need to let Khalil Mack go. They need to let Joey Bosa go. They need to let Corey Lindsey go. I think he's probably going to retire after his heart injury.
Lindsey restructured his contract.
Oh, they're keeping him?
Today. That happened today.
Oh, well, then he's recovering, I guess. I thought after that heart issue, it was unlikely he was ever going to play again.
No,
I really hope he comes back because he's big. They need to let, as you say, Mike Williams go. And that's just a lot that needs to be done. And, it's not like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack have had a great year last year. It's not like Mike Williams had a great year last year, but there's a lot of guys they need to move off. And then, they've got big deals coming up, right? Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel. Like, some of these players are going to need a lot of money. So if I'm the Chargers, my goal is to try and sign guys. You don't want to go out and do what you did with cornerback in the past I'm not even going to mention his name because Chargers fans, I think, don't want to hear it. You don't want to repeat that mistake with L'Jarius Sneed, right? Sign a guy who is elite somewhere else to some big money just to watch him suck with you.
The tough thing about the Chargers, though, is that when you have one of those guys like Justin Herbert, it hurts to just watch a year go by. It hurts. Right? Like, isn't that how you would feel?
So here's what you need to do. You need to say, Justin, we're bringing in a guy who can give you a run game. We're going to hope he doesn't Lamar Jackson ruin your passing ability. We're going to do our best to build a functional defense, and you're going to show us that you deserve the giant contract we gave you. So here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to sign some productive defensive players, right? We're going to bring in guys like Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith. Not the best players at their position, but guys who can play.
Danielle Hunter is right up there as one of the best guys at
He's just position. Not. He's not going to sign a top-of-the-market contract. I get that he had a lot of sacks this year, but he did not have he had a good season, not a great season. Yeah, I'm not saying these guys are garbage, but we're not talking about bringing in like Brian Burns from Carolina, right?
Danielle Hunter's getting a big contract, Ziggy. Danielle Hunter's getting a big contract. But okay, no, I see what you're saying. With Harbaugh,
guys like Micah Hyde, like just bring in players who can play, add cheap, effective guys on the offense. Guys like Noah Fant, Tyler Boyd,
little money ball action.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, and then invest in some big offensive player at the top of the draft, right? Hope maybe you can get Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe you can get Brock Bowers. Like there are a few players up there that I'd be interested in drafting.
I'm thinking, where are they? They're 5th right now. I'm anticipating that they're going to take Malik Neighbors.
That's another great pick, right? You can take whatever wide receiver you like. That's a fine pick. Brock Bowers is a fine pick. Like there are a few good guys up there.
I know it's heavily contested amongst Chargers fans right now. They do not want Bowers at 5. I know that Bowers is an unbelievable talent coming out the position, but again, tight end is not a premium position in the league. We've seen what can happen when teams take a tight end very high in the draft.
And don't have a coordinator that will actually use them. Yeah.
Just saying, Malik Neighbors fills in that receiver position. I mean, are you going to try it out next year? Your receivers would be Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and Quentin Johnson. And I don't want to. No, I
mean you'd bring in a guy like Tyler Boyd too.
Sure. Okay. Man,
Neighbors, I would be comfortable.
I've seen people so high on Neighbors.
They should watch some Brock Bowers tape. I mean, we very rarely see tight ends that can do everything. And you look at the Greg Roman offense, right? They have to hope the Greg Roman thing works out. Having a tight end who can block, who can run fast, who can separate. I mean, he will blow up a defensive end on one play and then burn a linebacker on the next. There are very few guys like that in the NFL, and so having good tight ends.
In the Chargers should draft Brock Bowers camp right now?
I think they should strongly consider it.
Like, let's say it goes 3 quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr. Right now, I put Robert Ziggy Ziegler on the clock for the Los Angeles Chargers.
I am more impressed by Brock Bowers than either of the wide receivers available.
Over Joe Alt, too?
Yeah. I've got some problems with Joe Alt. I get that he's a Notre Dame guy, and I respect him. And plus, you have left tackle locked up. It makes me a little bit less worried.
Okay. Look, I need to watch a little more tape on Bowers. I know that from what I've seen, dude looks unbelievable. But Chargers fans, they seem to really not want him, or a lot of them don't. So leave it if you're a Chargers fan listening. Let us know in the comments section what you would preferably do at 5 if it goes to 3 quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr. like we're expecting. Who would you take as of February 20th right now?
I'm just saying Brock Bowers is going to run under a 4.5 at the Combine.
I'm looking forward to seeing some of the numbers that people put up there. It always amazes me how much things change.
It doesn't even match. Combine numbers don't even match up that well to NFL play.
No, I know.
But it's so much fun to watch some of the best athletes in the world just do athletic testing and be in awe of what these guys can do.
It is funny though. I'm trying to think of what did I just watch with someone doing his combine training. The numbers are just okay, but I can't remember who it was. I was watching something recently, but yeah, you see these guys go in the combine, and if they don't perform to a certain degree, it's like, oh man, they're gonna drop down the board. It's like, can we ever just draft players who are good at football?
This is what the Rams did that was so incredible, and why they keep hitting on guys in the late rounds. They said, who cares about 40 times? What we should care about is how fast they actually are on plays.
I was like, Puka. I think it might have been Puka. It might have been Puka. There's a little video that came out with McVay in the war room on draft night. And it's crazy to me. I remember sitting back at a restaurant during the Tyrann Mathieu draft when he fell into round 3. Yeah, there were character concerns, but Tyrann Mathieu was up for the Heisman. Watch the guy play football. Clearly, he makes plays. It made no sense with the Vikings trading back and taking Lewis Cine instead of going for Kyle Hamilton when he was there. Like,
don't
draft guys who are good at football. It doesn't have to be that hard. That's what the Eagles did, and it led them to a Super Bowl run, basically. Like, you're good at football. Jalen Carter, draft the good football player. It makes no. I get so mad about this.
Before we go too far, I do want to say the must get and must keep for the Chargers. No, you're good. I've said his name a few times. I think a must get for them. You'd love to have Tee Higgins, but Tee Higgins is too expensive and he's not available.
Yep.
So take the next best Bengals receiver available, and Tyler Boyd. He's one of those guys who's he's perennially underrated because he doesn't put up huge numbers because he's the wide receiver 3. But this is a guy who's a nice, solid, consistent receiver for Cincinnati. He doesn't get hurt very much. He plays hard. He catches the ball. Ask Chargers fans what they want in a receiver, and they will tell you the answer is basic competence. He will deliver you basic competence. And a player they must keep, not a guy who gets a lot of attention outside of Los Angeles, I think, but Gerald Everett is a pretty important player for this team. He's not the best tight end in the league or anything, but again, he catches the ball. He brings in a few touchdowns every year. He can block. There's always a few plays where he just breaks 3 or 4 tackles and goes for a long run. Like, this is just a nice, solid, productive weapon that you can get for cheap. And the Chargers need that as much as they can.
Gerald Everett is always the guy when you need someone on your waiver wire in fantasy, that he's the top projected tight end of the week. Then you go, do I want to take him? And you look down and you're like, yeah, there's really no one else here. So I'm going to roll with Gerald Everett. And you hope that he has, one of his games where he puts up 60 yards and a touchdown. And generally speaking, though, he's a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, he's not putting up 1,000 yards, but he's good for 500 yards and a handful of touchdowns. That's not bad.
He's good to fill in. Yeah, he's a solid player.